What's up?
Bless up, bless up. You mentioned you lived in Jamaica at one point.
Well, I grew up spending a lot of time there through a family friend connection. Made my own connections, as you do. And so I spent a lot of time through my teenager years, spending months at a time there. And then as a young man, stayed up in the hills of Trelawney Parish and Bunkers Hill community for quite some time. Kind of thought I would never leave at one point, but met people there from from other places, and is actually kind of the start of an adventure for me that led us here.
Beautiful, beautiful. So, where do you want to start? Where do you want to start? A lot of people think electroculture is just also about rolling copper wire, but it also involves living soil as well. If you want to, we can just get into it and
Okay, okay.
like the plasma.
Yes, no, everything's connected. All this, I mean, as we know, in general and specifically with these topics, I mean, they're so interwoven, even back to breath work. That's honestly, that's how I know about your page, your practice, and your work, is because I'm trained in medical qigong, so parasympathetic breath is at the core of everything we did. My teacher, rest in power, J. Michael Wood, his whole approach to teaching medical qigong was a lot of the breath work traditionally wasn't taught till later, much later in the practice, years in, even sometimes, when you had already done so many things to bring up trauma in the organ systems without really a mechanism to process it correctly. So his approach was, the breath work is fundamental. That's step one. We teach that, and then you can build everything else off that. And I feel like even with science, and even with agriculture, it really, it's what made sense to, that's how I made sense of electroculture, was through qigong medicine. And so that's
Mm,
why I use that language still, because that's the fundamental for me. That's fluxing polarities, breath in, breath out, at its core. So that's fundamental for me, and so that's why I think I connected with what you're doing just right off the bat. When it
right.
comes to applying it to agriculture, we can create a state of divine conductance, I refer to it as. We don't make chi, we don't make energy. Everything that's here is already here. We're not, we're
Exactly.
not, yeah, we're part of the creation, but we're not creating anything new per se. We're just choosing what to conduct and what not to conduct, or, frequency. That's where frequency comes in, because we're choosing to dial in bandwidths, so to speak.
I
So
like that you said. I like that you said dial in, because a lot of people think or just equate the body as electric, but in actuality, it is dielectric, which is the aspect of light as well, where the plants don't just feed off the sun, but they feed off a different spectrum of light, even in dark spaces. How is
yeah,
it growing? Like mushrooms, for instance. Mushrooms can also grow in dark spaces, right? How is it doing that?
yeah,
I think if you have different lenses and stuff, you can easily see how the mushroom is magnetizing certain light spectrums to itself to feed off of,
yeah.
especially when it's deep rooted in the earth and feeding off that dielectric symmetry that we see, like in our
Yeah.
veins, in the projector, etc.
Yeah, I completely agree. A lot of the copulations of yin and yang are things that we can't visibly observe. And even back in the day, they would refer to it, like in the 1700s, as kind of an abiogenesis, almost referring to that. It was a very churchical dominated scientific community at the time, I guess, especially in like England and some of these places, where they were trying to say, well, those theories aren't true because they're abiogenical, or like they're referring to life without parents, basically. But because you can't observe those yin and yang copulations, that doesn't mean they're not there. Lack of proof is not proof of lacking, especially when it comes to our limited sensory abilities, especially if we don't work to cultivate them. So yes, like, and also with light, with the sun, it's like what something is and what we define it being made of are vastly different things usually. Western science will tell us that the sun is a ball of helium and all these gases, but we know it's much, much more than its simple diagnosis. of the constituents, you know.
Some people may equate it literally to a black hole. Like, why do I go on top of a mountain? Why isn't it getting hotter? Does that make sense? Like, that doesn't make any
Exactly.
sense.
Yeah, why is it warmer in the shade? Like there's these phenomena that just totally throw some of these things. And I mean, there's variance, you know, and that brings us back to electroculture too. There's so many compounding variables in agriculture that to simply break down the success or lack of success to a crop to one thing would take a very astute person who's used the same space and grown the same. You have to really be able to delineate what was the cause and what was the effect. I'm such a huge advocate of electroculture, but I would never tell someone, oh, that's all you need to do to have success on your farm. You know, there's going to be a whole array of things you're going to need to do. It's going to be a lifestyle. It's not about one thing or the other. It's a holistic approach, just like health. You would never say do the breath work but eat crap food. You would never say they contradict each other. They're not. I think there's a something I can't quite articulate here, but I think there's a strong connection between paramagnetism and parasympathetic state. They're states of divine conductance. They allow us to utilize what's already here more efficiently. With more
But it's the aspect of, like you said, magnetism, and the aspect of if I'm saying it right, coaxial circuits. And coaxial circuits is, again, the veins that we see. If you look at a plant, you see the veins are there. What is that? What is that? So when lightning is hitting, it's not the plasmic resonance and geometry that we see is actually connecting to that resonance, like you're literally talking about, to bring it full circle.
Yeah, plasma flow, you know, like I've seen people be like, well, plasma's in blood. It sure is. You know, that's, you know, we could see that as chi in many ways.
Exactly.
As a visual manifestation, perhaps. You know, again, like what something is, what it's made of, it gets tricky. Like a rattlesnake will strike at fear, but then you will say that fear is expressed as a gas, like carbon dioxide or whatever. But what is it striking? It's striking at the fear, right? Coming out of the kidneys. It's striking at that non-harmonious chi of the kidneys at that moment. But then you could easily say, oh, it's this gas. But that makes less sense to me. You know what I mean?
So to also connect it to parasympathetic and the magnetism part. Well, when you're in parasympathetic, you're more in what? Homeostasis, home.
Yeah.
Where the space of birth is expressed via source.
And you're attracting oxygen. I mean, because it's paramagnetic gas, one of the few paramagnetic gases.
Keyword magnetic. I love that you're bringing up the magnetic, because if you have two magnets and you're pouring different elements in there, it won't really stabilize. But then when you pour oxygen, it'll stabilize in midair via those magnets.
It's certainly. And what you were referring to in the beginning, as far as so one thing that I like to make focus in electroculture is building soils with the potential to have high capacitance. You know, and I think this is similar concepts to parts hydrogen or pH can get into a tricky situation in how it's viewed. Just like spirals, there's a lot of focus on the spiraling of energy, but to understand spirals, you have to come with a perspective. Are you talking about from above or from below? If you're talking about a vertical spiral, because if we just throw out the word clockwise, that becomes a perspective issue.
Exactly.
So it's just like I'm a big advocate of self-experimenting with electroculture, and I mean comprehensive experiments, and I'm trying to guide those because it seems to be either a real quick adaptation of really quick and easy stuff, kind of almost like the fast food of electroculture. It's very highly promoted. It's easy. It's accessible. It's quick, but it yields little result. I understand why it's appealing, and there's some truth sprinkled in. You know, and I think most people doing it have the best intentions.
of
So
course, for sure.
my point is to delineate without being divisive. Divisiveness, I don't want to do that.
Yeah.
You know, and if someone's happy with what they're doing and the results they're getting, please continue with what you're doing. Like, stay your course, live your truth. You know, do not listen to me. But if you feel like I see a lot of people experimenting with it and then commenting on, I'm getting no results. I'm getting no results. I did this. It didn't work. So as
Right.
someone who has spent some time with it, I'm just trying to delineate without being divisive and saying, well, this is perhaps why it didn't work. There's some other aspects to include. You know, it'd be like, I think one form of like we keep referring to gatekeeping in our personal messages is like, let's say with breath work, if you were to come upon someone suffering from a dysregulated nervous system, and we know that most all illnesses derive from dysregulation of the nervous system, traumas,
And breath
and there's compounding.
patterns and breath
Right.
patterns.
Exactly. Yeah. Cause, you know, that's what we see. So if you came upon somebody and you thought, wow, if they were to do this parasympathetic breathing, I think they would be healed in a lot of ways, and you didn't share that with them, it's kind of a form of gatekeeping. Just because
Big
you're
time.
withholding that information that could be helpful. Now, you don't want to cross the boundary and force it on them or to make them feel less than for not knowing that already. That's not the point either,
Right.
you know. But to bring it to their attention and invite them in, that's what I want. It's an invitation. You know, it's an invitation to just go a little further.
And thank you for setting the tone, and that's the main point we want to project to everyone here. We're just opening an invitation and going deeper on, you know, the mainstream of what electroculture is, and just diving deeper and get out the repetitive the
Yeah,
conversation we keep on seeing over and
yeah.
over about electroculture.
It
That's
feels
the
like a
main point of this whole live.
it feels like a broken record, and
Yeah.
it's like I certainly do not know everything, and I hope I never do, because I
Same.
want this journey of learning to continue, like, by any means. But I am sharing what I have experienced.
Same.
We've
And
been
that's why
farming,
I like to call it breath journey,
yeah,
right?
breath
Instead of a
journey,
session, it's a journey.
journey, and I hope it never ends. I hope the perpetual student in me, you know, I want to destroy my own paradigms periodically, you know, and rebuild them. And if they don't get destroyed, then you know there might be keepers, you know, the things you hold on to. Um,
Bingo, brother. So can you dive more into like the living soil and nitrate beyond what many people think they need, you know, copper wire, etc., things like that.
yes.
And
So
it'll also connect to magnetism. I already know. I feel like you're just gonna hit it on point.
yes. So our soils historically, and I say our soils as a world community, in some places more than others, this detriment may be felt. Geology plays a role as far as what kind of bedrock you might have in a certain area. You know, this goes into the idea of vortex points and all kind of things that we could get into, but they're magnetic points. But many places, we're here in Middle Tennessee. Our farm hasn't really been farmed since the late 1800s,
Mhm.
but, you know, ferrous instruments, iron instruments run through these soils. That's just one little contribution of demagnetizing what paramagnetic minerals we did have in the soil here. We have dolomitic, like we have limestone as our bedrock. Our limestone, not all limestone, there are limestones that are slightly paramagnetic. Rock,
I think Florida is a big
yeah.
one for
And Florida has also a lot of quartz, right?
that's more when you go up to Georgia.
Okay, okay.
But yeah.
Uh, Interestingly enough, about clay, like in Georgia, my grandparents are from Georgia. Clay soils are very balanced.
Mm.
And what's interesting about that is even when you get back into creation stories about, you know, things being from clay, like the forms of the human bodies, whatever, you know, they're they're stories. You know, people call them fables, myths, creation stories. But what this is really clay is balanced, diamagnetic and paramagnetic minerals. It's very rich. It's hard to farm in because it's thankless to till, but
Mm.
it's very rich in minerals and very electric. You know, like the Baghdad batteries. A lot of ancient technologies were based on a block of clay because of their balanced magnetism. Um, our soils are very diamagnetic here because of the limestone bedrock versus somewhere like Vermont or Colorado where they have a lot of basalt or granite. And it's why you see a lot of really important buildings built out of stone that is highly paramagnetic, especially granite, because it has all those crystalline structures creating piezo current, and a lot of factors there. Here, our soils being very diamagnetic, we're adding paramagnetic rock minerals. So we add basalt, which is probably the highest in paramagnetic value. You know, there's interesting work by Immanuel Velikovsky, who wrote some books, one called World in Collision, Earth in Upheaval is another one. And it's very scientific analysis of ancient stories from like Greek mythology of like interplanetary battles. And it explains, it's electric geology. And so it's explaining how certain formations were from electromagnetic, basically spark gapping between solar energies and earth energies. And you take that dust, then you add those two phases and you get formation.
Is that close to ammonium nitrate?
Ammonium nitrate, like what was used to make weapons?
Yeah, like that. Because I've heard that being planted in the soil as well will also help the magnetic resonance of the soil in that regard.
Well, ammonium nitrate is highly sold as a fertilizer. A lot of it was surplus material from weapons making. And a lot of this has to do with the original suppression of electroculture. So after the World Wars, you have a surplus of this material. And yes, it does. The ammonias are fixable into nitrogens, but you have to also look at what the intention of this product was for. And I see that as somewhat of a like more than metaphorical idea of the assault on our soils via materials that were intended as weapons.
Yeah. Oof.
So it's a hard one to swallow, you know, but
there's somewhat of a beauty there. It's like,
yeah,
you know, how mushrooms come out of shit,
yeah,
basically.
The butterfly, yeah. I totally understand that perspective, yeah. Unfortunately, I think the only bad side of that really would be that, you know, a lot of agricultural technologies that were taking a lot of momentum, gaining a lot of momentum at the time, were intentionally kind of swept under the rug around that time, early 1900s, to sell a lot of these more chemical-based products. So that's probably the downfall, and the fact that we don't really need that to create the same effect.
Right.
So creating high capacitance soils is like very similar to, you know, like in dietary nutrition, we're talking about creating an alkaline state in the body. But I believe that's like just so that we can capacitate chi, like an alkaline battery, you know, they're very small, they're very efficient. That alkaline stasis is very high capacitance. The chi, the energy in those batteries lasts for a long time and is distributed very smoothly versus like acid core batteries from a car that require an alternator and they die when they get in extreme hot and cold. It's just a way to see it in my own mind. But I think that we're doing that with the soils by creating the equal phases of magnetism, and that even ties into scalar to scalar. I mean, it even ties into the concept of like equal amplitudes divided and reconnected of the same frequency, creating that basically imprintable field of energy in all directions at the same time. That is an ascending field of energy that transmutates things into their higher potential forms. And that includes soil elements. So elements become new elements.
Going back to that 0 point, if you didn't hear me, sorry about that.
Oh, yes, exactly. No, I didn't want to speak over you. Yes, exactly. So I see humus and compost, you know, that's carbon that's broken down to an unrecognizable form. basically is what humus is in the main constituent, and we use vegetable waste compost on our farm. So we started out as kind of a organic vegetable farm, doing things how most small organic vegetable farms do them. A lot of animal inputs in the beginning, because that's what's mostly available and advertised for organic farming. You know, blood meal, bone meal. So after some time, through my qigong training, through different parts of my personal life, it just started to feel like what we were putting in were byproducts of industries that I would tell you I despise. It started to feel very hypocritical. It didn't feel like I didn't feel like I was farming it to my truth. So it took several years to figure everything out, because you have many dimensions. You have potting soil for starting plants. You have compost. You have fertilizer inputs, all these different constituents, to figure out how to source them.
Yeah. So to rewind, literally what you were saying, so you're basically saying some, not all, but some organic farms are using, flesh, etc., bones, etc., to feed the soil. At the end of the day, it is technically organic,
Yeah.
right?
Yes.
And yeah, and some people may be more plant-based than animal-based, and at the
Sure.
same time, it's getting from the soil. I mean, at the end of the day, we do feed back to the soil one way or another.
Yes.
But yeah,
But it's the fear. It's not even so much the material.
right,
Again, what is it made of? It's not really the material I'm against or I don't want and this is my own truth from my own experience. I'm not teaching or preaching dogma.
right. Just sharing what you're going through and what you've seen and what you've experienced
Yeah.
and felt.
Paracelsus, let no man belong to another who can belong to himself. I mean, do you, please. But it did not feel in line with my personal missions, my personal dharma belief systems. It felt like I was, at the end of the day, supporting industries that I would say I didn't support. And I also didn't want it's the fear. If you hear your loved ones being murked out in the background, you get the fear running through your body. If your youth is pulled away from you when they're trying to feed, like a young animal pulled away to dairy and animal production, there's so many wild things that go on, and I'm not here to demonize that. I'm just here to say there's a lot of fear involved. There's a lot of trauma for those animals, and I didn't want to put that in my ground and then subsequently into my whole system of what I'm producing. So that was a personal mission. So we use rock minerals and vegetative waste compost. That's what we use. And the humus in that vegetative waste compost and in all compost is broken down carbon.
Right.
So we're carbon based, I really don't personally, I'm not, when I first started, there was a big push on like carbon footprint. That's still discussed, but you saw a lot of people, even restaurants, that use like crazy amounts of garbage trying to count this carbon footprint because their farm was 40 miles away or something. That doesn't even make any sense. Why are we demonizing carbon? Like everything is, I think karmic footprint is far more important. Like what?
Oh, oof.
What do you mean? Carbon.
I mean, hey, tell me what does the plants breathe in so we can get the oxygen?
Exactly. It's a cycle. It's perfect.
The amount of trees on this earth does not equate to the amount of quote unquote carbon waste, etc. Like,
let's
come on.
embrace what's perfect as much as we can point out what's wrong. Like the whole point is that we are part of this cybernetics. Like we can steer stuff off course and we can help steer it back on course. It's not a doom. It's not a fatalist mentality. That's non-productive and non-solutionary, and really just the destruction of your own soul at a point, focusing on just what's wrong constantly. So to bring solutions is another level of work.
Yeah, man.
It's easy to point out problems. Like I could have done that all through my 20s and 30s. And just now in my 40s, do I feel like I could bring any solutions? So that's all I'm trying to bring, is the solutions to the problems I've been working on. So in agriculture, you have so many factors. Trying to be a small farm, like our farm is just my wife and I and my son. He just turned 14 yesterday.
Hey,
Um,
happy belated
big up
birthday.
Winston. I love you so much, buddy. My wife Tracy. I love you. These are my critical team members. You know, my wife is a genius agriculturalist. A lot of the reasons these things are figured out for us is because she took on other components. She took on other things that, you know, I didn't have to worry about. So was able to spend more time on these things. So it's definitely something I could not do alone. And my brother Levon, thank you so much for your help. But these systems, they're part of a group of solutions. Electroculture is part of a system of other benevolent practices. You know, it's a major component, but it doesn't stand alone. I would never say install electroculture, never put in compost, never put in rock minerals for fertilizers, you know, never hoe. No, you're gonna have to do all the work still.
Yeah,
This is not
utilize
about
everything we have. It's there for a reason. Why not? Why not? Why
right.
not? Why compartmentalize? Why limit ourselves when the all that is has literally shown us everything? It's the same concept and story I love to tell where this guy is in the hole, he falls in the pit and he's like, God, send me help. A guy comes by, oh, here's a ladder, sir. No, God will save me. Here's a helicopter, sir. No, God will save me. Goes up to heaven. And they're like, hey, why didn't you save me, God? He's like, I sent a helicopter, I sent a chopper, I sent a car,
Yeah.
sent all these things.
Yeah. We're here for each other as part of that extended
Exactly.
network of the creator, you know? I mean, who else is going to do it?
Someone's got to do it.
Yeah, someone's got to do it. So everyone does it how they know to do it, hopefully. And if we all do that, you know, magic happens, you know. And when I talk about like demystifying certain parts of electroculture, it's not at all to take the magic out. Nature is pure magic. Like
Mhm.
you know, I I love everything mystical. But I also don't want people to see that as a crutch to not explore basic sciences that they're very capable of.
Right, because
Because a lot of times you'll be like, oh, you're super interested in that. Why don't you apply it? They want to keep it over here in this mystical part of their world where they don't actually apply it. But it's like the breath work. We could be masterful in our minds. We could know every breath alchemy technique. We could know every qigong exercise, but if you don't do them, you're not doing them. It's the same as not knowing them, and in some ways worse because there's that little seed of truth inside of you saying you need to do this. You know, the ignorance might be more blissful at that point. Um, Without the application. Uh, and so like everyone involved in electroculture, I read, you know, Crystal Flu's book for years. I looked over it for years before I thought about applying it. I looked for other people to make comprehensive equipment that I could buy, you know, and apply at first because I'm like, oh, this is kind of complicated. You know, I'm trying to run a farm, go to Qigong school and do, you know, you come to the conclusion that like, oh, maybe this is something that I could, you know, I'm sure you get this. People, you try to promote something that you believe in, and you get very kind suggestions and very kind words, but you also get a lot of you should do this, you should do that. It's like my brother and sister, you should perhaps that you is you speaking
right.
to
I'm
your
like,
inner self.
hey, you buy it, you make it, you do it then.
Yeah, you please do it. Do it for me.
Yeah.
Do it for Devon. Do it for everyone.
Add to
You
the
know,
collective.
add to the collective. Yeah, you're welcome to bring something to the table. Like you're welcome. You're welcome to the table, and you're also welcome to bring something. I don't think the person that doesn't bring anything to the potluck should diss the food that other people brought to the potluck. Maybe they should just humbly accept that they're there as a guest and have a nice time. Um, I mean, constructive ideas and criticisms are great. I
Yeah.
mean, you have to have that's one level. But just a blatant like you should do this or you should do that. It's like, oh, some of the times I'm like, I'm trying my best, you know. I'm trying to provide this type of data for you, but there's some types of data that lead to things being misunderstood unless you have the concept of the parameters surrounding the experiments. That's why you can't really, like I've reached out kind of to many people who seem to be doing electroculture projects or even films to try to add some valuable input just humbly, and kind of turned away just because I don't think they want that. I don't think they want that like hard work aspect in there. I think they want to sell a really quick idea, and that's fine. But it's not what I'm promoting, so it doesn't necessarily go together.
Well, but
Because
I feel like that's why we harmonize together, because we're both on the same aspect of longevity.
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 Yeah,
Longevity.
yeah,
Yeah, this breath work may get you high, this and that, but what about the long spectrum? Your life is the meditation. Utilize it all throughout the day. Utilize it in real
yeah.
time. That's what it's about.
I would rather contribute something long-term piece of work to this community that others can build on. And maybe in 100 years, there's somebody that's like, oh, look at this little pamphlet this dude wrote back in the day, and inspire someone to carry that on than like get any sort of thing right now. Or even, it's not about that, man. You know, I'm a farmer. Like I grow vegetables for a living. They make my own deliveries to my restaurant customers in my CSA group. They're about an hour away, and that's what I do for work. These systems I've developed over years out of self-interest, and it got to a point where it started to feel selfish as to not share it, as well as a part of my dharma to share it. So this is a selfish endeavor in some ways, and in some ways a selfless endeavor, and that's an honesty I want to bring forth. You know,
Yeah,
this is
that's a give and take. We all choose to be on this platform. Do it. It's just not. It's a natural law that is, and nothing in this life is free at all. There's always an exchange one way or another. So it is
yeah,
what it is.
and it can be energy. It can be just energy, but there's an exchange. You know,
Oh,
it's just like when you go somewhere. Like I know you just got back from Jamaica. It's like you took energy there. You know, I grew up seeing a lot of people go there and just take from that
mm,
place, and that's common. It's not just there, but I've seen people time and time again on small levels and on very large levels take from that place that is so giving, you know, out of the fact that they're able to capitalize on, you know, whether it's bauxite or or even capitalizing on cultural aspects of the music, ganja business.
you know, Stephen just came out with the album, and one of the songs is "The Thanks I Get," and he made a great point. You know, at the end of the day, all these reggae artists is actually what put Jamaica on the map.
Sure.
The biggest export, in my opinion, is the reggae music
Yeah,
that is hitting all parts of the world to say, hey, we exist. This tiny island over here exists. You know, we're a place. This is our
yeah,
culture, etc.
yes,
And they don't get as much recognition as they should, because that is literally what is bringing more people in, the money in, etc. Opportunities as well beyond
yeah,
that,
yeah.
and it's a big thing, and it was a pleasure, you know, being with my dad, seeing the years that he could have put tons of his money back into America, but he chose to put it back in Jamaica and
So cool.
build up communities
So nice.
where the other people in the communities are building up their own thing. So it was a beautiful
Yeah.
thing seeing that.
Yeah, that the donship doesn't have to be a violent thing, you know.
Mm-mm.
It's okay to be a benevolent don in the community if you have the
Yeah,
ability
man.
to. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
um, yeah. So you understand what I mean, you know. So even if it's just a vibe or an energy, or maybe some things that are hard, you know, I used to take my friends certain things that were harder for them to get there. This is back in the early mid '90s mostly. You know, really interesting time. I spent a lot of time up in the hills and a lot of time also in the towns. And um, you know, big up Bunkers Hill, big up Trelawney Parish, big up Falmouth, Salem, Mobay Youth. I love you all so much.
Mm.
I really there's a special place for me, you know, special place for me. I was very much educated and uh, taken into the fold and the bosom of Jamaica more so than where I grew up. You know, some of the people I was blessed to spend time with. The first farm I ever saw or helped out on was up in
Mm.
Bunkershill in Trelawney Parish. My friend's father, who was near 80 at the time, and I would help him carry water from the spring. He had about an acre hillside. And in my mind, that's what I always thought about when I thought about farming, because I grew up like inner city, right outside of downtown in Nashville, Tennessee, which is not a huge city, but it's big enough. And I didn't see farms. I didn't see stuff like that, you know. But in the back of my mind was always that's what that was, you know. So when I made my own place, it's definitely that's the vision, you know. That's the vision. But the electrical. So the concept is simple, you know. I see a lot of people who do promote the very quick, simple coiled stick version, still promoting the literature like from Justin Christofflu that doesn't mention this at all, that is talking about the systems. My first antenna is highly designed after the Christofflu antenna. I mean, I think everyone could be honest and say that's what you were using as your model if you were making electroculture antennas in recent times, because it's one of the only resources. And there was also a group of Midwestern American farmers making antennas basically based off his ideas too. At the time, they were sharing data. There was men in Perth, Australia, making antennas, all kind of very similar. A magnetic base with these certain functions on them, and we can go through them. What you see, what I was finding when I was first looking for equipment was a really hardcore kind of single-minded idea that it's just about atmospheric electricity, right? That's a component of the antennas.
Right.
That's one component of several. So you have atmospheric electricity, which is an exchange basically of positive and negative ions between the atmosphere and the ground. And that's always going on with or without an electroculture system. That's how this life is generated. It's like we keep going back to the solar winds bringing, you know, the cations, the positive ions, and the earth is the negative. We call it heaven and earth in Qigong, and the marriage of heaven and earth is life, you know. The earth looked at as basically, I love Walter Russell's description of it being a sea of magnetism. The
And
solar bodies being,
that's really what I felt.
yeah,
To bring it full circle, I didn't have my scalar plate plugged into anything, and we were up on the plane, and I was just holding it, and I'm like, oh, I could just feel it buzzing.
yeah,
So a lot of people need to understand there is way more like positive ions in the atmosphere, but also scalar waves, magnetic waves, etc. More high, the higher you go as
yes,
well. Keyword
yes,
heaven, etc.
yes.
And I feel one day if we ever have floating cities, it will be based off just that simple fact.
You're exactly right. You
And
can
it'll
send
be
an anode up
feeding,
there.
it'll be feeding from not just that, but they'll definitely maybe run like a magnetic coil also connected to the earth somehow to make it float. Because
Yeah.
in Japan, they just started doing this where they're building houses that is based off the magnetic resonance, and you can like turn the dial to lift the house even higher. So if a tsunami comes in,
Oh, I
earthquake,
love it. I
it's
love it. I
perfect.
love
So
it,
I'm like,
man.
oh, I'm just seeing that. So we're definitely gonna have floating cities maybe one day, very soon. You never
I,
know.
I think you just hit it right on the head. I mean, I've already witnessed experiments where, you know, you send an anode up in the sky hundreds of feet, and the Earth is our infinite grounded negative. And so between, I mean, you can power a lot of things just a few hundred feet high
Yeah.
with that positive. There's way more up there. That's why, you know, when you see people placing the antennas, even if it was just a copper coiled stick, that would need to go up above the canopy, above the plants. That would need to go up higher, because the plants and trees are like our primary antennas,
Right.
right? My friend who's an electrician and a electrical scientist, he says basically everything that's rooted in the ground, you could imagine having a big negative whip coming up off of it. And that's going to basically spark gap with the positive. And so basically the first thing those solar winds hit, you know, you have the opportunity to collect from. So the higher your antenna, the better when it comes to the atmospheric electrical component. So yes, you know, the rule of thumb is 20, 25 feet or higher. 60 feet would be great. Hundreds of feet would be amazing. You might even almost get to the point if you went high enough where it would be too much current for plants. You know what I
Yeah,
mean? As
that's
far as
another thing.
a 24/7 thing, because there are like Frankenstein forms of electroculture being used, especially in China, um, which is really neat. I mean, I'm definitely interested in all aspects. I mean, I'm interested in the human experience, not just the spiritual one. Like, let me see what other people can do too. It's um, so they're inducting large voltage, but just in little sporadic pulses. So what we're doing is we're using free energy 24/7 through feeble voltage. And at the core of these systems is fluxing potentials, just like breath in, breath out, yin to yang. These are fluxing potentials. That's electromagnetic induction, beautifully explained in Faraday's first law of magnetic induction, which is a Maxwellian equation. And although I'm not fixed just because a certain field of academia says something is a law or whatever, they're still breakable. So I'm not fixed minded dogmatically in that, but if someone accepts those other principles as truth, then you would de facto accept this as truth in electrical science as well. So it just depends on your viewpoint. And someone who doesn't find that inherently true may choose not to use electroculture. But all farmers and growers of plants know the difference between their crops directly after an electrical storm. It's pretty well known. I mean, it's well documented. So all those extra positive ions in the atmosphere and in the troposphere and in our lower atmosphere are way more plentiful during that time. So there's an increase in the cation exchange capacity of the soil with the negative anions. You have more electricity, and that voltage, that little bit of voltage, it transmutates elements into higher potential elements. It fixes nitrogens out of ammoniums. When ammoniums are allowed to accumulate to a toxic level, you can think of soil as being like a kidney or a liver at that point, and you're accumulating just like when you release too much adrenaline, through living in a sympathetic nervous system. You're releasing a lot of adrenaline. Adrenaline has a use. It's for saving your life or someone else's life. In Kung Fu, in Shaolin Shan Kung Fu, we call it sudden body tremors, and we train a technique to learn how to release adrenaline for, let's say, breaking out of when 4 or 5 people have got you pinned down. But it's highly advised by the teachers to learn this skill, but don't overuse it, and don't ever do it if you can avoid using it, because releasing that adrenaline into your body is harmful to your organs.
Over time. Exactly.
Yeah.
It's somewhat, you're telling your body, I'm shocking you, and not in the electrical sense,
Yeah.
but more of
Trauma.
Again, the sympathetic sense, going back to sympathetic, parasympathetic.
Yeah.
That fight or flight system.
Exactly.
And,
Exactly.
and to add back into why I think it's so luscious here in Florida, this is the thunder capital of the world, actually.
Yep.
So that also helps the soil with the nitrate and everything.
Yes.
Always hitting on the plasma.
It's the plasma interacting with the atmospheric nitrogens and oxygens over bodies of water or while it's raining, and that rain is then capturing those elements and that are available, very available and electrified, because people add lime that comes out of a bag, dolomitic lime, to soils. That's very traditional agriculture, and some people will say it's because of the pH adjustment, but the pH adjustment is more of a side effect. What it really does is lime does slightly increase the cation exchange capacitance. But the difference between a bagged lime, it's like an inert substance, kind of like, again, to come back to this analogy of kind of a prepackaged food. But when you transmute basalt in humus into nascent or newly born lime, that's a flux of potentials. That's a flux. You just went from paramagnetic to diamagnetic, and if given time would go back the other direction. So you're using this flux of potentials to not only utilize the elemental constituents of both, but the electrical production of energy or chi, whatever you want to look at it as, in the soil. And this is obviously going to invigorate growth.
There is
As
the
well as
dielectricity aspect.
yeah, exactly. And you know, like we say paramagnetic, we mean inclined to magnetism. You know, not necessarily that it's magnetic. It's inclined to magnetism. It goes through phases. There's other elements that interact with these elements to make them inclined to magnetism.
Ooh.
And that's another thing that's little understood about paramagnetism.
And going back to the parasympathetic, because a lot of people when they do the alchemy breath work, you know, later on the day, they feel that sensation that just comes over their body, versus if they were to do sympathetic breath holding and stuff like that, or you know, different methods, whatever, they feel like a crash.
Yep.
Towards the end in terms
Yeah.
of the sympathetic side. And that's what I keep on hearing from that side. But if you're on the parasympathetic state, you feel that sensation just start to, you know, elevate in your body, and it's on a steady balance towards the end of the day.
You find an ascended equilibrium.
There it is.
You know? You really do. You get so much energy. I remember in my first year of training medical qigong, we were doing just basically work on ourselves to prepare, and we still are. We still do. That's still it. But we are all one. When I treat myself, I treat you. When I treat you, I treat me. You know. But we make sure that we're in a state to where we're not letting our own mind influence come into the treatment of others, or usurping their experience by projecting our own energies into their experience, or on our level taking on their negative experience or something that you don't want. And that's, you know, again, that brings us back into a full system of training versus kind of a washed down version.
Yeah.
And what I think, and like, again, sometimes these are difficult conversations, but we're having relationships as humans, and like the point of these conversations isn't, sometimes they don't keep the peace, but peace is not really the main objective. It's love. So sometimes we have these hard conversations in the service of love.
I like to say harmony, you know, peace and harmony.
Exactly. Peace and harmony. And I think we can still harmonize when we disagree.
Yes.
You know, that sometimes the best harmonies are like, okay, we have these you know, different ideas, but we're still out here shining brightly together. And that's covalent.
I want to quickly add on. You know, the main reasons why I went to Jamaica is because of Nikwa. Shout out Nikwa, 09. And 2 years ago, it was, you know, how I was introduced to her. We had an argument about urine therapy and stuff like that, right? And then we just became friends, and then all of a sudden, we're partnering up on a retreat. So I want to quickly give a shout out to her, because if it wasn't for her, I don't think, you know, I would have been in Jamaica a lot sooner and help heal certain aspects of myself, you know, going back to my roots and you know, seeing what my dad has done, etc.
I love that. I'm the same way. Some of my best relationships started out as respectful, opposing opinions, and even slightly argumentative. I think that I feel like I'm a Capricorn. I feel like Capricorns are like that in general.
Same. I'm a Capricorn too.
Bless up. So yeah, you get it, man. You know, I respect someone who can like disagree with me and be at peace. I mean, that's love, man. You know, much more so than just agreeing with each other to keep that peace. I mean, peace is great, but you know, if it makes us avoid having conversations that are a little bit more difficult. And that was just to segue into like the idea that like with breath work, with energy work, like I said, we spent the first year focusing on kind of our own traumas, getting up to a point where we even felt like we could work with others without putting that out there and projecting that. It can still be a challenge, and there'll be times when I'll be like, no, this is not the time for me to work on you because I have something that I'm doing.
Yeah.
You know, and I
want to add on to that, because mirror neurons is a big thing, and it's also what has delayed my quote unquote university, whatever you want to call it, to certify people in alchemy breathwork. And one of the main components is at least you need to be in the breath family members group for at least 3 months. That way I know that you're working on yourself, right?
Yes.
When you do this type of work, you know, the reason why someone would come, you know, fly in person with me and they feel, hey, I feel totally different versus on the video, etc. Because you're in person and you're feeling what I'm feeling in real time,
Yeah.
in the same environment, because your mirror neurons is picking up on that. And I picked up on that too when we did the acupuncture on our last elemental symphony, where we were blasting another person. And even when I went through it myself, the person right next to me was getting blasted on their acupuncture points, but I could feel the resonance as if he was blasting on me.
Yeah.
So what we carry into our practices or sharing it with others, it holds weight as
It
well.
resonates. Yeah, it resonates, and it's valuable. It's valuable, like what you're speaking on. The energy that you do build for yourself, for your environment, that's a valuable thing that you've built. That's a valuable thing that you spend time. I mean, Kung Fu just means energy time. That's your Kung Fu. That's what you've spent time
The
cultivating.
janitor
It's
is doing Kung Fu. The
it's your,
teacher is doing Kung Fu.
yeah,
The calligrapher is
everyone's
doing
doing
Kung
it.
Fu because it's repetitive. They're doing it
Yeah,
in a repetitive
the
cycle.
question is more not do you do Kung Fu, is what is your Kung Fu? Some people's Kung Fu is gaming and watching movies, and that's their Kung Fu because that's their reality of what their energy and time are spent doing. And that's not a
Right.
disrespect. That's just what it can
Exactly.
be whatever you are doing. That's your Kung Fu. You can own it. You can change it. What is it? And that brings me like 3 months. So minimum 3 months, right? In medical Qigong, you train for some years before you're going to get your first certification as a practitioner. Just like in the alchemy breathwork, I'm sure to become what you would consider, you're never going to know everything. What I mean is what the teacher considers what they have to offer, uh, fully learned and comprehended would be your certification, basically. So your training is as valuable as your teacher, basically, And those who prescribe your area of knowledge really dictate a lot of what you go out and radiate to do. And you have a lot of in the energy world, 3-day certifications and stuff that just feels super rushed, and then they start treating patients and you're like, well, you have to do this for some time to let yourself unfold into this paradigm. And I'm not saying that someone can't be innately amazing because maybe they've spent their whole life doing this and they've never labeled it. So I get how there's there's exceptions to everything, to every scenario. So I can't speak on everyone, but basically what I'm getting at is, a 3-day certification into an energy system is not the same as 3 months of breath work or 3 years of training, which is not the same as 20 years of training. So there's just levels. But I feel that you do want to get to a point of competency so where you're not teaching things that just are going to do more disservice than they are good. And I guess that's a decision everyone just has to make for themselves. I'm not certainly conducting any rules or anything. I just, I know that I held back for a long time. I think that with social media, it's easy to share your learning experience, which is great. We just need to make sure that that's what's being explained. Like I'm taking you along with my learning experience as opposed to, I'm presenting data that I've collected over a decade that I feel pretty confident about. I could have taken you on that journey with me. I was basically, on a personal level, pretty much avoided a lot of social media and stuff for a long time, almost to the point where it started to become a crippling aspect for me because I wanted to share this material. And I had to get over that personally, realizing that, okay, if I was alive 100 years ago, I send text messages and call people, I would have probably been like one of those guys like, I'm never not using the mail system. I'll always write letters or something. But I had to get over that, and embrace the technology a little bit. And it helped me understand that there's wisdom-based technology and there's ways that we can use it that are so much more profound than avoiding it.
Yeah. Like I said, the whole story, if it's here to utilize, it's just how we use it.
Yeah,
right?
I agree.
And,
Give me a little while to come to that.
Yeah, something to note. I brought one of my portable scalers into an ayahuasca medicine experience, and I had only just one person really look at me funny, like, oh, why would you bring that? And then I looked in the middle. I'm like, isn't there a spiral there? Don't you understand that this has been done eons and eons? Like your ancestors knew what the earth really was in terms of a technology. It's not just the spiral is for such and such or ceremony. No, it has deeper resonance because you're creating a resonance within the space that you're conducting the ceremony in to help amplify the whole experience. And the whole participants, everyone was saying, wow, that was the most electric, something resonating in my whole ayahuasca experience, etc. That's what the scalar is there to help aid in the overall experience in terms of the geometry. And at the end of the day, it's composite material made from earth.
Yeah,
It's just,
yeah.
you know, if you have the time, you can literally take the biogeometric symbols from Dr. Ibrahim and, you know, run it into the earth. I'm sure you know, you've seen what they call those crop fields where there's like different symbols and stuff.
Crop
You,
circles.
the crop circles. You can run biogeometric crop circles and see what it does to the land instead.
Yeah,
So
totally.
the
Like
information
somatic
is
patterns.
out there.
Yeah, totally, totally, man. With the spiraling, interestingly enough, you know, in the I Ching, the yaos, the lines, like the solid lines being yang, and the broken lines being yin. Those are two-dimensional or one-dimensional, I guess, representations of spirals.
Mm.
So the yao that's solid, the yang yao, is a clockwise spiral from top to bottom, from heaven to earth.
Mm.
And the yin yao, the broken line, is conversely a counterclockwise spiral. And so when those two meet in the middle, what you essentially have there is the scalar. And there's a trigram called the Taiji trigram that represents this scalar field. And there's my teacher often spoke of the trigrams representing chromosomes, and I can't really validate that from any perspective other than his, and I think there's truth in there though. But yeah, those spirals, man, those spiraling energies, basically it's the same thing. It's the equal. That's what we want. That's what we try to cultivate, you know, in the breath work, equal in and out. Once you get to that point, we do have, you know, there are breath techniques for purging energy, and there's different techniques, but our common all day long breath is the stomach breathing with the nose, parasympathetic breathing. It's not something that you want to have to even stop to do. You want to integrate
Right.
it fully all day long, every day. It's a new life paradigm, not a thing that you have to stop. Maybe in the beginning it is very helpful to, like, you know, set reminders, because you'll get out of step, you know, as you know, I'm sure. I mean, I know you train people in breath work
And
a lot. So.
and it's also connecting to the integral way, but I do want to reverse back real quick to the lines being chromosome,
Yes.
because it also sounds like biogeometry, how certain spirals, if you make them with your hands, it sends a signal to certain parts of your organs as well. So I think your friend definitely was on point with that in some regard.
Yes. Yeah, my teacher, he's amazing teacher, J. Michael Wood, is a very good teacher. Yes, again, like it goes into mudras, that gets into like symbols of the priesthood. I mean, there's so many interesting ways to take that. So I think with electroculture, one of the main points is that there needs to be a conductor between positive and negative. Just like everything's a standing wave that we can see that exists, like we are a wave, you know? Each individual is a wave, and even as a collective, we're a larger wave. And that, you know, you have to have somewhere for those potentials to flux through. That's why grounding is so significant, standing barefoot on the ground, because you're allowing your access to that grounding point more directly. So you're conducting that flow. I mean, that's just as simple as that. It's kind of well understood at this point how beneficial grounding is. But that's just more proof in the realm of you need a negative and you need a positive. So if you see an electroculture experiment where there's no ground contact, where there's like a bunch of potted plants on a balcony per se, there's no ground. Now, I'm not saying that earth energy is only available by contact. I don't want to be that narrow-minded. But also know that there's a difference in direct contact versus, let's say, an energetic contact when it comes to plants. I say that only because in Qigong we were trained, ideally you're on the ground when you're doing it, but you want to train to project that and to receive that earth energy from afar, if need be, even on an airplane, let's say.
Mm-hmm.
I believe that you were probably so grounded that you were able to not when you were holding the scalar in the plane, that even though you weren't on the ground, it was sensing the ground through you, Devon. And it's just like when they say an animal, like a cat or a dog, comes in from being outside and then people pet those, they've been grounding. So they're transmitting that. So someone who is well grounded will maintain that earth frequency. And that's part of our health. We're creatures of both heaven and earth. So we need that as much as the other, and some systems too, even of energy medicine, you see a lot of focus on just bringing in the light. But if you bring in the light to a tumor, you tonify a tumor. So you need to take out what doesn't need to be there, put in what does, and then balance the energies.
Right.
And that's medical Qigong versus a system maybe like Reiki. And again, I always just say this because that's my delineations, not out of divisiveness. So that being said, you need a fluxing of potentials in electroculture. There's different ways to do that. The traditional way is a line in the ground from your antenna point, which hopefully is as high as you can get it. Once you get down about 15 feet off the ground, a lot of those positive cations are going to just start pairing with the surface of the soil because they're in close enough proximity. It's like when you get the magnets close enough, they're not touching, they're here, but then boom, they pull together. So that's how that's working. That's why the antenna needs to be up, so that you can catch them into your antenna before they reach that point, because you're trying to concentrate them to some degree in the system.
So I have a quick question. So in one of the farms here, I wrapped this on a palm tree, and then we literally sticked it and connected it to the palm tree. Maybe the stick wasn't even necessary. I could have just wrapped it on the palm tree because the palm tree is already on the land, technically. Yeah. So what do you think about that? Because technically the trees are antennas to a certain degree.
They are. The trees are pretty much, if you're treating a tree, like there are traditional setups for utilizing electroculture antennas on trees all the way back to the 1800s. I typically more so recommend adding just paramagnetic minerals when it comes to a tree to help it be more conductive of that phase, especially here because of our geology. So what I might recommend to someone, and this is what I get back to, meaning compounding variables, we need to understand the big picture of this electroculture thing, not get bogged down in specifics of how many volts is it putting out or how many. It's like, okay, that's fine. I get the question, but that's going to vary at every moment. It's like blood work. You're getting a snapshot of that moment.
Yeah.
Because blood is changing, elements are fluxing, things are changing. You're going through different circadian rhythm organ systems, channels.
And that,
your blood work is...
That's why the hair is actually way better than, in terms of analysis, than the blood work.
Yes, exactly. And also your hair is more like your primary antennas. I mean, that goes back to some old science, man. You know already. I mean, story of Samson, the reason that, in Rasta culture, they would, I don't know if you're familiar, I know you're probably familiar back in the day, a Coral Gardens massacre, things that happened, atrocities that the Jamaican government, with pressure from the British, put on the Rasta communities there. They murdered people. This is a little known part of history, so few people outside of there know about these things. Yeah. And many people were just killed, and who wasn't killed, they would cut off their locks, and they knew it took off a source of power. And you have a lot of people out, oh, that's vanity and what. No, it's not when it's cultivated in the right way for that intent,
Exactly.
So that being said, we work like the conductors. This is our positive by-way point in Chinese medicine, and our perineum would be like our negative point per se, or the feet. You could look at it, but we kind of look at that Taiji pole. is the terminology that I was trained in, and it's like a pole of energy that goes through your center down through what we would call the chakral points in Vedic medicine or the Dantians in Chinese medicine, and down to the ground, and that's your conductor, and you're a part of that. So your body is that distal point of that system, basically, that's touching the earth, and that's why in Tai Chi Chuan martial arts, you spin, and you're spinning around that Tai Chi pole of energy. And the Tai Chi, of course, being the interactions of yin and yang, because before that you have the Wu Ji, which is the two separate, still one but not interacting, and that's
we do that in scale. Well, I call it scalar movement. Where it's intentionally in certain spin movements where you're utilizing certain breathing patterns and certain movements, and you can add it to. It's literally mirroring. I can see it right now. So that's fire.
Yes. No, it's exactly on point. That I felt like so many of our things have overlapped over the time. I remember the first work I saw you doing was with the meridian hitting, and I was like, oh, okay, this is real medicine. Yeah, all the like qigong medicine stuff really resonates with me. So it's just a personal system that I was trained in, and that makes sense to me. That's my language, so to speak, with the universe. And I fully understand too, and just for conversational points, that it's not inherently a Chinese system. It's a universal system used by the Dogon, used by so many cultures, that the Chinese culture just did a really good job of writing it down and explaining it.
And holding
Yes.
to it, yeah.
They did an excellent job for the world. Thank you. You know what I mean? To those dynasties in China who wrote these things down for us, because they resonate truth. You can read them, you can know about them, but if you do them and apply them, then you get the resonance of truth. And it's the same with the electroculture. You can know about it, you can ask questions, you can think you understand it. A lot of people's attempt, and I just say this because I'm so interested in it myself, and I'm into social observation more so than I am criticizing. It seems to be almost a domination of the academic part of it. Like they want to dominate the concept and they don't really have any intention of applying it, which kind of just becomes futile. And then you have to really choose how you're spending your time as someone who's trying to help others learn. Because you're like, well, is your, I'm not questioning you, but is your point to use this and then to teach others? Or is it just to kind of mentally dominate the topic? So you can, it's like ego at that point, ego learning, and it's like the news, it's like knowing about a lot of tragedy really doesn't help anyone if you're not prepared to maybe go help or offer solutions.
Right. I also said there's studies on it too, etc. But it's just also following natural law that got me the idea of blasting the scalar projector, the plasma into the soil, where you're connecting either a copper, etc., or even like you said, you have magnetic properties within the soil. It doesn't even have to have copper in there. You can have those properties in there, and specifically blast the soil, because if you're blasting the plant leaves to, it can't take on too much. If the lightning were to hit the earth, it doesn't leave plants. It leaves
burns.
meteorite, if you will, too. Property is close to meteorite. In my opinion, it is meteorite, but it leaves certain properties of that. So it's best to actually blast. I tell people, blast the soil. You don't want to blast the actual leaves or hover over it. Too, because it'll feed into even the dielectric aspect, not just the ion aspect, but also the light that is connecting with in the atmosphere. Because at the end of the day, I do call it a projector, but it is just connecting to what is already there.
Yep. Yeah, I get that. I totally get that. It's like a spark gap. I mean, it's just like lightning. You're manufacturing that in a handheld form, and that's why when I've been making compost teas for 20 years, and I thought, why wouldn't I use this here? I didn't buy it for that reason. I've had it for a while, for almost 2 years or so, early on when you first started offering them, and on honestly, it was a gift from my wife because she had seen me looking at it, and
Oh,
I was like, oh, I want to support this brethren, and I want to buy one of these, and even if I could get it somewhere else, I'm like, I want to support the homie, he's doing work. So
thank
sometimes
you.
it's a choice to support someone. You know what I mean? Not even like, oh, I could make that, or I could get that, or I could do that. Yeah, well then you're welcome to do it. Or you could be like, oh, this person's already on the move. Like, let me support their mission. It's all like, so I'm a big fan of like, I watch a lot of Louis Farrakhan speeches and sermons just because there's a lot of gems in there. And like one
There is.
thing he said recently that really, it's from an old speech, but if and I don't even mean it, I'm actually taking this for myself. I'm not preaching it about me. I'm saying it's his sentiment was like, if you're envious or jealous of someone, help the person, go
Mm,
help that person. And it really helped me because I was like, oh yeah, there's these people doing work that I kind of want to be doing. Let me go contribute. And then that contribution becomes your work. And then your work inspires another. And that's how the chain goes. So if we look at each other like competitors, it's not going to work out. It might work out for a few individuals, but not for the collective. This technology, everything that I'm doing, it's been available to learn and do since the 1700s. The
bingo.
information is
All,
all right there. It's in
all
English.
there.
There's some places like I've been talking with many people in Brazil. So I'm printing some informational documents and pamphlets and really simple like 6-page pamphlets and stuff right now. I'm waiting on them to get here. As soon as I make sure they all look nice, I'm going to get them printed in multiple languages because
Mm,
there's some countries where I'm realizing they don't have translated books. So like we have translated books from France here in English, no problem. We can read them in English, but they can't read them in the Brazilian Portuguese there. They have to then go learn English. And it's like, man, a man shouldn't have to go necessarily learn 3 languages to read this
to get
information.
oh man, I just want to add on to that and shout out Celestial University. I could have done, hey, I can do my book myself and do my breath book by myself, whatever. But hey, he offered to, hey, let's collaborate. I have a team that does this and this. I'm like, I manifested you, and I know for a fact, collaborating, it's going to help people in other languages even more
Yeah,
than me
yeah,
doing all the work,
yeah. Because this is like, we have a lot of information here. Um, it, and I'm just kind of figuring this out through people reaching out where these places are that are like, we don't have the information here.
Mm.
Sometimes that might not be totally true. Sometimes maybe you just haven't dug enough for it, but let's go. Let's make it easy. Let's make it available, as I can do that. So I want to make some of this information available. Like I've noticed these different pockets of more intense interest than others. South Australia, South Africa, Puerto Rico, Brazil. There's these pockets that are like really interested in electroculture. It's like I get messages on 10 for every one from these places. You know what I mean? It's really interesting to me. Simply like, why is it? But I mean, I'm just enjoying that they're interested. But I'm definitely interested in. I know certain places had a legacy of it back in the day. Like there was quite a bit in Australia. There was a man in Perth making antennas. So there's certain places where it had kind of historical presence. But some of these places aren't those places. They're just places that are innovative minds. I don't know how to put my finger on it exactly yet, but if there's a place like that that I see has continual growing interest, I want to try to make that information, at least that I have, available to them because they seem to want it and they want to do their own thing. I mean, I'm not trying to sell them anything. A lot of these places, it doesn't make sense to like the either the embargoes or the way the mail systems work.
Yeah.
Some places it seems hard to send stuff. Unfortunately, I wish it wasn't the case because a lot of these people are like, I would just buy your stuff, but we really can't get it, or our dollar is our currency is so weak to the dollar, and I know that's because of so much like
Yeah, I wanna let people
wrongdoing
know
that.
some of my scalar stuff that I've shipped all over the world. We paid even extra that I'm like, wait, we're low on like what? How we've been paying 200 to ship just to what here? Like what? We've been doing that all this time?
Yeah, it's
So
wild, right?
the work, all right, going back to
Yeah,
the work, and we don't even
shit.
upcharge them. We're like, hey, I mean, we're sending them. They already paid for it.
Yeah,
And sometimes we lose money out of it,
yeah.
and
No,
it's
that's
it's not even that. It's like the fact that it at least made it across the country, and that knowledge will then spread in different ways and help different communities.
Yeah.
That's the
Yeah. The
goal.
feeling to know that your equipment that you put a lot into is out in all these different places doing its good work is a great feeling. And like you said, yeah, it's more about that. It's like some places just their systems are set up to where it's very difficult. Even like Canada has crazy like customs fees and stuff that, you're like, Canada? You can't get mail from the US easily? And they're like, well, it comes easily, but then they charge us a bunch of money when we go to pick it up. Like an
Oh
extra
yeah.
fee. And I'm like, oh, okay. I mean, I don't know how to do anything about that because it's on that end. But, I could try to offer you a slightly better price or something. As long as costs are covered enough and stuff. Yeah, this obviously, as a farmer, you get used to like not being like extremely like financially wealthy. It's not an endeavor you go into typically to cake up. Now, I'm not saying people can't, but I mean, it's a humble occupation in that way. You do a lot of work. Most of the time you're fronting your product to a restaurant who actually then goes, or an individual who then goes and like makes money on your product and then pays you. That's just kind of how it works. So it's very much a work up front, have faith, do good work, and hopefully that comes back. But same as all work, right? Same as all the valuable work, it's all up front.
Right.
Yeah. So with the electroculture antennas, like we started talking about, there's a lot of focus on the atmospheric component, and we kind of went over that. Yeah, the higher you put it, the more cations, the more positive ions you can draw that'll pair through the conductor with the negative point. And for all those people who are looking for a little bit more specific information, the brass rod, there should be a brass rod on an electroculture antenna, historically speaking at least, because brass is a really good conductor of telluric current, which is different than atmospheric electricity.
Yeah,
That
can you also tell people what brass is mix of? It's a mix of um,
well, as
different.
far as brass is an alloy. I know it contains copper. I'm not a metallurgist by any means, but pure brass. I do know you want pure brass. Don't get a brass coated rod. You actually don't see this being employed almost at all. You see most of the rods on antennas out of steel, which will have an effect, but there's been so many studies done on brass and its ability to conduct these currents specifically, which, we're not looking at the earth that's flat or round here. We're looking at it as a toroidal field of energy. And that's the toroidal field that you're harnessing with telluric current. That's why that pointer will face magnetic south. And basically, you want to use a compass and you want to find magnetic south, and you want to align your telluric pointer with that direction. That's all you have to do to position the antenna correctly. That's the only thing that's really important directionally, is that your brass telluric rod is facing south, magnetic south, wherever you are in the world. Because I get a lot of questions, well, will it be the opposite in this hemisphere, here or there? Use the compass, align it with south. That's all you have to do, and periodically check it. That's telluric electricity. That's different than atmospheric electricity. Then on the antennas, you will have a voltaic stack. Alessandro Volta, the word volts. He was creating the first batteries basically with electrochemical exchange of metals. Copper and zinc are traditional. They're like the most inexpensive metals to do this with. So if I'm creating an antenna, I'm trying to make it cost as little as possible. That's what I'm using. And they're also excellent exchangers. When they have rain on them, they produce even more voltage. It's like you can take a nickel and a penny and put them together and test them with a voltmeter and get a little bit of voltage. If you put salt water on that, you're going to get a lot more because of the electrolytes. And there's electrolytes in rainwater.
To add on to the telluric current, it also travels via sea as well, underground.
Water, air,
water.
Everything. Yes, everything. Exactly right. I'm glad you pointed that out. You're exactly right. That telluric current is flowing through everything. And that's why we can harness it through water, like I was doing when I'm making the teas with the plasma projector. We use the antenna there to, and you'll notice, or perhaps I'll point out that when I made that, I had a lower elevation antenna because you have certain people who don't want to put a tall antenna up. You have people who can't for physical limitations, for space limitations, I don't know, neighborhood organization limitations, all kind of situations where you might not be able to put an antenna 25 feet up. So that makes that atmospheric collection part of that antenna, that wire bundle on the top, I have one here, this wire bundle that's on top of the antenna, that makes that part obsolete basically if you're not putting it up high, because that's for our atmospheric electricity. So if you have that component on it and it's mounted lower than 15 feet for sure, it's kind of an obsolete component. So I make models for lower elevation where we utilize tensors and we utilize piezo current, instead. So it's all form and function based on how it's going to be used. Otherwise, this model has all the same components. This is the brass rod that would face south. This is a voltaic stack. It's just zinc and copper interchanged. Those electrochemically exchange all the time and produce current. When they get rained on, they produce more current because there's electrolytes in the rainwater. Magnets that are in line with the telluric current. So this is facing south. This is the southern side of the magnet that you facing this way. You can test a magnet's polarity with a compass, just like you can in direction. This is a thermocouple. So this is using what's known as the Seebeck effect. Dissimilar metals at different temperatures create voltage between them. It's similar to electrochemical exchange, but it's a different phenomena. And so you have different types of metals that are used in different types of thermocouples. Chrome and aluminum is a good combination. And in here, they arc in different directions and touch each other, one way when it's cold and one way when it gets warmer. So differences in temperature, which is happening all the time, every time they arc one direction or the other, they're directly inducting 30 millivolts of electricity just directly into the system. So you have all this free energy, passive collection. Someone sees a thermocouple on an antenna and they question it, but they use them all day, every day in refrigerators, ovens, air conditioners. Well, they sense heat, they arc, and they trigger a switch with that 30 millivolt output. So these are common like heaven and earth technologies that we use all the time. And we're
beautiful. And if you notice, guys, it's different currents that is being utilized, just like in our body. We have different currents, just like the heart holds, it has a different biogeometric shape of how the water is flowing through. And it'll be different for how the liver, of how water is flowing through the liver. And it'll be different how the water is flowing through the stomach. Different currents.
Yes, I love that because in medical Qigong, that's spot on because we treat the organs. We treat the organs and the trauma patterns and then the associated breathing patterns all as one issue, seeing dysregulation of the nervous system and lack of divine trust as basically being one major issue that has a manifold of expressions through all disease. Because once we stop trusting the divine order, we stop trusting ourselves, we stop trusting our intuitions, we stop trusting those whispers of the Ahura Mazda, of the Zoroastrians, that divine intelligence that we know is that truth, but and I speak from experience. I've denied it many times. It's only by denying it did I know what accepting it maybe felt like.
A lot of people ask me like, how did I start this? I'm like, well, when I had my mentor at the time and I went through my first breath journey with him, had me fast for 2 weeks, etc., I realized the cause of my ignorance. That was why I suffered. Why I suffered leading to that downward spiral at that time, and now I'm going on the upward spiral and just meeting everything in harmony.
Yeah, I think we're all trying to as we're adults here, we find to some degree, hopefully we find our way, but we all kind of have to go back and heal that, not to be corny, but that inner child, that little boy Chris, that little boy Devon who suffered, we got to go back and prop that man up, that little man up, so they can become into the fullness of what they can do now. Because I feel like we just suffer those traumas, and we stop breathing correctly as soon as we're triggered. For a little boy in this culture, that could be as soon as circumcision, right out the gate. Boom, you're done. And you're not even taught, you're not taught to go back to that way you came out breathing moments ago with your stomach.
Or a slap on the baby's back from the doctor. Like, ah!
Exactly, or a cold implement. I mean, it could be so many things as a youth. And from most of us, even if we made it through that part, even through the hospital, if we made it, you know, or home birth or whatever, it's going to be something emotional. It's going to be the first time someone stifles you from living your truth or something. It could be a whole host of things, or hits you, or, you know, a whole host of things that make us go into that sympathetic mode of life. And unless someone's there to help us out of it, my Qigong teacher definitely helped me out of that, you know, and I still have to remind myself and become him sometimes for myself, you know, because I think as we try to help others, it's really also, like I said, it's a selfish endeavor as well, unabashedly. You know what I mean?
Well, fire, brother. Thank you for this live. Thank you for
Yeah,
tapping in.
thank you,
Thank you
bro.
for connecting. And I'm going to post this on YouTube. So where can people find you, and information wise? And when you come out with that book, let me know. I'd love to spread it out on my newsletter as well, and
Thank
on
you.
my blogs.
Thank you so much, Devon. Thank you for having me on. It's a blessing and an honor. TheFertileCurrent.com is our website. Lots of information. I'm putting blogs up as often as I can. Lots of diagrams, installation videos. I'm trying to show people exactly how to set these systems up, and I'm trying to stay very communicative, answer messages, and answer questions. I love the worldwide community of people and their interests, so please keep it coming. Much love to everyone. And I'm here to help, you know what I mean? Like with Electroculture, talking about some stuff not to do, but mainly I'm talking about stuff to do, positive reinforcement. Let's go, you know, let's figure out what is wrong and let's just change it. And much love, you know. Thank you so much, Devon.
Likewise, brother. Have a breathful day, everyone. Peace and harmony, and maybe we might do a second one in a month or two.
Love to do that.
Peace.